Okay, we're
Wonderful.
good.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Beth, for sharing that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started today. We're going to be talking about communication and professional writing. As I said, I'm Emma Newell. I work for the Leadership Center, a recent graduate of Ohio State with my bachelor's in agricultural communication, and I'm currently pursuing my master's degree at the University of Amsterdam. And Beth, would you like to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. As Emma said, I'm Beth Flynn, and I've been with the Leadership Center for 22 years, and I do leadership training and consulting on behalf of the Leadership Center.
Thank you, Beth. And I ask that if you are not speaking to please mute yourself so that we can have a coherent conversation and everyone's able to hear appropriately. So I want to start off with just our agenda for today. We're going to be talking about how to write reports and meeting minutes. We're going to talk a little bit about some email etiquette and some Zoom competencies. You may know most of this, but it's always good to have a refresher. Please put all your questions in the chat box, as we said. So first, we're going to start off with going over some reports and meeting minutes and how exactly those come together throughout our professional work. So first off, let's go ahead and start with some meeting minutes. So as you can see here, this is a basic layout of what meeting minutes will typically look like. So you'll start out with the meeting name up at the top of the document. Usually this is done in a Word style document and then can easily be saved and transferred to PDF or whatever file type that you need. Then we go ahead and put the date with the time underneath that, just so that it is coherent when we come back to it later. If it's online, I like to include the Zoom link below that and the recording link if applicable. If it's in person, when that's able to happen again, I like to put the location. So if it's on campus, I like to say Ohio State University campus. Then I list the attendees of that meeting. And I also list who is the note taker and the moderator of that discussion. In case anyone has any questions, they're then able to follow up with that note taker. So to start off with the meeting minutes, I like to copy and paste the agenda provided by the facilitator of that specific meeting. And so typically that'll be sent prior to the meeting date, and we'll just talk about the basic bullet points within each topic that will be discussed. So I like to put that main topic in the main bullet point section to make sure that it's easy to to skim the document and see what was discussed mainly, but then also what were the subtopics and details within that. So putting that in that sub bullet point underneath the main bullet point. And then we put the contact person of that subtopic or main topic, so that if you have specific questions about email etiquette, for example, you can contact Emma Newell and she will be able to further help you address your questions. And we do that all the way throughout the meeting, easily taking either bullet points. They don't need to be necessarily in complete sentences if it doesn't make sense for that type of meeting. So feel free to switch between complete sentence form, and also with bullet point form. I find it easier to do bullet points because then I can easily type them as people are speaking, and also it's a lot easier to go back and skim through those main points. Then we take a look at when the meeting ended so that we can determine how long the meeting was. And then we go ahead and put our next meeting information below that so that everyone is able to continue their participation within the group. So we can insert the date, time, and location, including that Zoom link if applicable, just so that it's easy to go ahead and log in next time and add to your calendars. So as for reports go, this is very similar to the meeting minutes, just a little bit different. If you go to some sort of professional development event, if you go to a conference, if you go to a big event that you need to submit a report to the office for, you can go ahead and include the event or meeting name. So for example, the conference name, then the date, time, and location of that meeting, your name, the author of this report, the main topics discussed at the conference or meeting, the subtopics, and then any further details. As I said before, this can also be in bullet point format or summary paragraphs. It really just depends on the type of meeting and the author and what they would like to do and are more comfortable with. So feel free to pick the format yourself. But then also below that, you'll want to include any additional notes and recommendations or takeaways. So if you have a suggestion that you would like to be implemented from that meeting, then you can go ahead and put your ideas and personal anecdotes below that. And if applicable, you can also include the expense sheet in order to keep organized and make sure that refunds are given when needed and that all of the receipts are together in that same document to help with that refund process. So does anyone have questions, comments, or concerns in regards to the meeting report and meeting minutes portion?
I do. Emma, what do we do if there's not an agenda given?
Good point, good point. So if there's no agenda given, usually there's some sort of coherent timeline within that. So the main points that are discussed, you'll just have to listen and write down those main topics that then will usually lead to breakout discussion or further discussion points within that main topic. So it does require some close listening. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns in regards to meeting minutes and reports? Hearing none, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic here, which is email etiquette. As I'm sure that you guys are very familiar with email, especially during this day and age of COVID. And so you may know some of these points, and hopefully others you'll be able to learn throughout this presentation. So I just wanted to go ahead and start off with the basic email format that we all are used to with Outlook and the OSU email platform. And we're just going to go through real quick these different parts that are needed to create a professional and coherent email. So you'll want to make sure that this from section, you're sending from a correct email address. So for me, I have my Gmail, my personal Gmail, and my OSU email within my Outlook. And so to make sure that I remain professional when sending my work emails, I always check that that from is from my OSU account instead of my personal accounts. Then going into who I want to send it to, we have our general recipient, our carbon copy, and our blind carbon copy. So for general recipients, that's your basic two. And then for our carbon copy is when you want someone else, for example, to be in the room, however, not necessarily needing to respond. And then our blind carbon copy does not show any of the recipients of this email, who the other recipients are. So if you are sending an invitation to an event over Zoom or further information about an event that you're hosting, you'll want to do that blind carbon copy so that your participants do not have each other's contact information and upholding those best privacy practices and confidentiality. Then you can go ahead and put in your subject line, making sure that it's clear, to the point, short. That's what will show up after your name. Then offering a professional greeting. I always like greetings. It's very open and warm and easily flowing. And so then you can put the person's name within that. Then you will go ahead and put the body of your email. So inserting your message with clear language, correct grammar, spelling, punctuation, all those important and fun things right there in that body. And then also a formal closing. So sincerely, or go Bucks, or best can be examples of formal closings followed by your name. first and last. Then I also wanted to mention the feature of an email signature, which it can be included after your email and after your concluding remarks. So that can be easily accessed within this portion of the Outlook email, and you can go ahead and add that to the specific email address that you have in the From section, and that will then be continued throughout every email that you write and will appear during the write-up process. So I want to go over a couple do's and don'ts of email etiquette real quick. Some of the do's, including all parts, as discussed earlier, within every email. So making sure that our email is fully filled out, it's clear, concise, consistent, and relevant. People do not enjoy reading those long emails, so being as to the point as we can is always appreciated. Another recommendation is to read it out loud before pressing send. This can help catch any grammar or punctuation mistakes, also making sure that you're being clear, consistent, concise, and relevant within your email. So I like to do that. You can also then take that moment, that extra moment, to check to make sure that all parts are within that email. So do you have attachments if applicable for this email in particular? I also recommend utilizing transition words. So first, second, third, next, therefore, and then that will also help with the flow of your email and the ability for the reader to fully comprehend your main points. You can also organize your email if it is going to be longer using subheaders, bolded words, and bullet points. So if I am hosting a meeting, I like to bold the location and the time perhaps, so that readers can easily, again, skim emails and see the main points within that. So that is something very helpful to do. I also want you to check your grammar and word usage. So oftentimes people struggle with which homophone to use. And so making sure that we're using the correct there, and there, yours and your, to and to, those can easily be mistaken and interchanged. So just to keep up that level of professionalism, making sure that we know the difference between those and which one we're using appropriately. Also, verifying any information if we're unsure about something prior to sending the email can eliminate a lot of confusion and make things more concise and understandable for the reader. Some don'ts that I recommend is capitalization can oftentimes be interpreted as yelling. And so in order to make sure that our voice is coming across correctly in our emails, making sure that we use capitalization at the beginning of sentences, but do not continue that throughout the rest of the sentence. Also, you'll see an example in the next bullet point of please don't use shorthand. Okay, thanks. So this is an example of shorthand, and this is an example of what that meaning is. And a lot of people don't know what shorthand you're using. It comes across as unprofessional. And so in order to avoid any confusion and make sure that we're having concise communication, it's best to spell out what you're meaning, even if you know that the person knows what is being said. Also, you should bail on using slang within professional emails. If you notice, I used bail on, which is a slang word. And so making sure that we're using words appropriately with their meaning in order to, again, include everyone and make sure that everyone is understanding of the statements being said. Also, if we use so many exclamation points, it often takes away from the actual excitement that we are trying to share. And so we don't want to over-exaggerate our emotions through email. So using one exclamation point, maybe two, and then also the ellipses here that you can see, it often creates a sense of boringness and can be communicated as a lull within the conversation. And so making sure that we use one period, or if we do need an ellipses, using the 3 dots rather than a repetitive kind of separation between the words. Some other considerations for email etiquette include the use of emojis. These can be interpreted many ways. A smiley face is very kind, and though that can often be interpreted appropriately. However, there are plenty of other emojis that hold their own individual meaning, and so making sure that we don't necessarily use emojis within our professional emails because they hold some connotations that we are not aware of and that others may place on those emojis within our emails that we don't intend. So just to make sure that everyone is feeling comfortable, avoiding emojis is always a great rule of thumb, but a smiley face every now and then between friends is always kind. Also, as you guys, I'm sure, are very aware as well, humor does not always translate well over the internet and through technology. And so just being very aware of what you're saying and how it can be interpreted is important within communication. Also, appropriate response time between emails is typically considered 24 to 48 hours. So if that's impossible for what you're doing, it's always a great idea to have an out of the office reply, or given the time of life that we're in, I've seen some people say within the end of their emails, I apologize if I take longer than usual to respond to my emails. I currently have a coworker that is 5 years old and going to school. Something silly like that is easily said so that you are able to meet all of your expectations within your home life and your work life, and making sure that everyone is aware of those responsibilities in order to alleviate any frustration that may arise, but really doing your best to keep within that 24 to 48 hours is ideal. And as I said, you can have those out of office instant replies, but make sure that when you come back to the office that those get turned off so that people are aware of when you're back in to work. Also sent from my iPhone, included in a lot of email messages at the very end. Oftentimes this isn't super professional, and also when we send emails on our iPhone, our thumbs can often misspell words. It's a lot easier to make mistakes, and so I would recommend doing your best to send your emails from a computer or other device in order to alleviate any of those mistakes. Then I also wanted to share a quick note that work emails remain within the server and are public record due to Ohio State being a public university. So any email that you send within your osu.edu can be accessed by anyone. And so making sure that we use it appropriately is always important. Then, as we've been talking about previously, just making sure that our grammar and spelling are correct. I like to utilize Grammarly, which is an application that can easily be downloaded on your computer, and it suggests tips and tricks to improve your writing. And I also want you to consider how many times you're using the word that. It's often unneeded and considered a filler word for emails and writing. So it's very similar to the word So we can go ahead and eliminate that and make our sentences more concise. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns in regards to email etiquette?
Emma, I have a couple of things I'd like to share.
Yeah.
Emma mentioned the 24 to 48 hour response time. So if you're working on something and you can't have the answer to that person within that 24 to 48 hours, I think it's perfectly fine to send an email saying, thank you for pointing this out to me or sending me this information. I'm waiting to hear from so-and-so so I get the right information to you. That way, it's because we can't pass each other in the hallway and we can't see each other so often. It's much easier to let people know that you acknowledge that you've received their email and that you're working on it. And Emma, a question did come up in the chat box. What's your recommendations on reply all?
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. And great point, Beth, as well. So thank you for sharing that. As for reply all, let's make sure uh, that when we hit reply all, the message that you're sending is intended for all prior recipients. So if it is, then that's fine. However, oftentimes it's not required. And so if you need to just be talking with the person who originally wrote the email, then you'll just be hitting the reply section, which will come up on an email after you receive it. Any other questions, comments, concerns, or things you'd like to add?
And Graham, I think that's a really good question, because how many times have you been angry about something and you want to respond or say something about the situation that not everybody should hear, and you would be very embarrassed if they knew you said that, and then you accidentally hit that reply all. And so, having said that, another thing, Emma, that came up that I thought of is everybody's under so much stress right now with everything that's going on. And it's really easy to have a knee-jerk reaction to an email because we can't see their body language. We can't get the tone. We may be reading into what's being said. And so I kind of have I call it my 24-hour rule. And if I'm really upset about something, I wait to reply until I'm calm. And then if I still am questionable, I ask somebody to read the email before I reply. That way you get an unbiased comment. Emma, something else has come up. Dr. Moore has highlighted before that the line "Go Bucks" may be controversial, as the term Bucks in history has been used as a slur for African American males. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. The full phrase "Go Buckeyes" might be more appropriate. And so that's a good point. So thank you. I learned something new. So thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out. I would have never thought of that. And so I will definitely be making those changes in my emails as well. So thank you so much for providing that.
I do have a quick question, sorry. I think we can all agree there's been a moment interacting in emails where variable information density in an email, someone misses something, or if someone does not read an email to its fullest amount. I think we all have had a moment where, like, per our last email, how do you, thinking about how much more of our work is being done via email, how do you gently course correct someone if you provided information to them in a past email and don't want to seem like you're snubbing them or adding additional layers of emotional meaning that's not there when you're like, hey, I already sent you that information. How would you handle that?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking that, Jacob. One of the things that I like to do when I respond to emails like that is just provide them the answer with the same text and style. So maybe when they read that pulled part, maybe it'll trigger in their mind like, oh yes, okay, I did read that, I did see that, but not using the "as per my previous email" intro. You can just say, thank you for your question. Below you'll find your answer, and then add the copy and pasted section within that reply email. And then just a simple thanks is what I like to do. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
The question is, most of us, we're certainly confined to a digital mode of communicating. And most of us communicate to literally hundreds, sometimes thousands of students that we serve. And one of the sentiments is that students get so many emails that they don't always respond to emails that they really need to respond to, or pay attention to emails. Is there a strategy, a technique that we can use just to get the person to open the email? Seem like politicians do a good job because they I don't know, even parties that I don't even support, they get my email and send me stuff. So.
Mm-hmm. So when a reply is needed, I put in a subject line before my actual subject, I put action required in all caps, and then a colon, and then followed by the actual subject line. You also have the option within emails to use this exclamation point to mark it as very important, and that will come up on the received email as well. So those two things mixed together can provide some double take as to response.
I have a question about sending out a congratulatory email about someone on the staff, and then when people respond, they hit reply to all, congratulate that person. And so you open up your email and you see several of those responses. What is the etiquette on that?
Yeah, so you can send those privately to the individual that you wish to congratulate by changing the to section within an email. So deleting any recipients here, and then just placing the person that you would like to congratulate here, followed by your congratulatory statement. Also, I think that it's important to set some expectations surrounding email etiquette within your individual office. So having that brainstorming and communication meeting and set aside time to discuss expectations within the office in regards to these type of questions.
Good. And Emma, we have the chat box is really lit up. So
Wonderful.
somebody else asked about the sharing good news. And what I do is, because, you know, announcing something great that's happened, you know, goes out perhaps from Dr. Moore. And then I just send it individually to the person who we're congratulating, because it does get very overwhelming to get 25 more emails saying congratulations. And then somebody asked about, and then somebody else responded, so I'm going to share this with you. How familiar should you be when sending an email with people you don't know? Should you go by Mr. or Mrs. or first name, Mr. or Ms.? And then Ashley responded that she uses MX as my honorific, so I avoid using an honorific unless I'm sure of their preferred honorific. I use first name. I just assume first name, unless I know that they are a PhD, and then I'll say doctor. I don't know what everybody else does.
Yeah, so the MX is wonderful. It's gender neutral, so we're not making any assumptions, and it's still very respectful. You can also, because if you're emailing corporate partners or someone of higher ranking, I also do a quick Google search to see if I can see an article or something about their identified pronouns, which then I could include. And also to make sure that if they are a doctor, including that doctorate in the beginning. But yeah, to play it safe, MX is always appropriate.
And then somebody else responded to this, keeping up. If the honorific is unknown, I use the first name and inquire how the person would like to be addressed in the first email. And then somebody else says, I get a number of emails to Dear Rachel, and then in parentheses, if I may. So they're asking for permission, but we must have hit a hot topic because there's lots of good questions in here too. Let's talk about chain emails. Colby, if you'd like to explain that a little bit more, your question.
Basically what I mean about chain emails is that you'll get CC'd on something that may have important information buried within a longer email that has gone to a number of people before, that you have no idea what it's supposed to be referenced to, or maybe what you're looking for. So how can we simplify it for that particular person who has a duty buried within there somewhere?
Yeah, great point. When I respond to, when I forward chain emails or include someone else, what I do is I go back through the chain email and will highlight with an actual highlighter on the email, the part that I wish for them to read. And then I also copy and paste that and put that in the initial email that I am either forwarding to them or CCing them on, in order to say, this is the exact part that I want you to look at and consider. And then if they need more context, then they can go back through that chain email in order to gain that.
And something else
Thank you.
that was taught to me or shared with me, and I found this very helpful. If I send you an email and you respond to me and I still have questions, that's the time to pick up the phone and have a conversation. I don't know how all of you feel right now, but we're just so overwhelmed, especially as Dr. Moore said, you're getting hundreds, maybe thousands of email, or responding to hundreds or thousands of emails at a time. And it's just so overwhelming. And that's why this is really good that we're having this conversation today, because I don't know about you, but I've got a lot of like questions or like pet peeves of like this, you know, the chain mail or, you know, these kinds of things. So this conversation is so good. The other question that came up is about read receipts.
I personally do not have my read receipts on because I respond within 24 to 48 hours. And if I need to take that moment to take the deep breath, or that 24-hour period that Beth was talking about earlier, I don't necessarily want that person to know that I'm taking that moment. And so I turn off my read receipts, but I also uphold that 24 to 48-hour response time. And I wanted to be respectful of everyone's time. I see that it is 3:30. Are we okay to continue, or would, being respectful of your time, should we forward this PowerPoint on to participants and then answer any further questions that are currently in the chat box via email?
Everything's been answered.
Okay, wonderful.
And I do use read receipts if I'm not getting a response from somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a continual history of like, I've sent things numerous times or about different things and I never get a response. I do start using a read receipt just to make sure that they're at least opening it. And then I know to pick up the phone and just have a conversation, not about why aren't you responding to my emails, but just saying I have questions and asking what I had asked in the email.
Great point. Great point.
Dr. Moore, what are your thoughts? We have some Zoom comments.
Yeah.
We could keep going or just send you this information, and if anybody has any questions.
We can keep going and let people respond individually.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So we're just going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some Zoom competencies and some norms that have been accepted during this weird time of transitioning to digital communication. So I'm just going to go over some basic terminology and usage forms. So meetings, which is what we are currently in now, foster collaboration, discussion, and attendee to attendee interaction. And then we also have the webinar format, which is utilized when a host is the only person that the participants are necessarily able to see. The host is the only person able to share their screen, turn on their video, and turn on their audio. Attendees have the option to communicate via a Q&A chat and also utilize polling questions. Attendees are not able to see other attendees within a webinar format. And then we also have a waiting room feature as well with Zoom, which you must have you must check a specific box when you're creating the meeting in order to utilize this feature. And attendees will then wait until the host is ready and then allow them into that meeting or webinar. There's also breakout rooms, which sends attendees into separate Zoom rooms for discussion, which promotes individual thinking. And then it goes ahead and calls participants back upon the completion of those Zoom room times. So it's very easy for the participant who is not necessarily technology savvy even, because it does all of those features for them, and they just sit back and let their computer take over. But this is only available within meeting formats. And I also wanted to just reiterate that Ohio State does require that all Carmen Zoom meetings and webinars have a password in order to maintain privacy within those meetings. And just a couple of accepted norms within Zoom. Usually it's appropriate to arrive 2 to 3 minutes prior to the start time of the meeting to respect everyone's time, respect your coworkers' time, and make sure that things are able to run according to plan. If it's being recorded, the host should announce so and allow participants to not have their video on in order to, again, maintain that confidentiality and privacy. Work attire is appropriate over Zoom, just to continue that professionalism through the digital age. Also, it's a great idea to mute yourself upon entry and when you're not speaking in order to eliminate any background noise and not interrupt the speaker so that we're able to have an efficient meeting. Also, it's great to have your Zoom video on if at all possible. This again creates that human connection and interaction within the digital age. Some presenters even find it kind of rude, potentially, if your video is turned off. So just to keep that in mind when logging into a meeting or webinar. Also, you want to make sure that you angle your camera to look straight at your face, and you want to have your lights on in order to show yourself with the video. So making sure that it's not, looking up your nose or down at your face, and then we can have this type of interaction that we would normally have. Also making sure that your background is appropriate. So if there is alcohol or any type of paraphernalia behind you, you want to make sure that you put that away in order to keep an appropriate workspace, if at all possible, utilizing a sheet potentially as a backdrop, or a blank wall, or a curtain is always a good idea. Then you want to make sure that you utilize your full name to identify yourself within the Zoom meeting, and you can change that by the 3 dots in the corner of your screen. Then it also helps if you're calling in to share your name upon logging in and before speaking, since we cannot see the name of the participants calling in. I've seen also many people include their preferred pronouns within their name in order to be more inclusive and allow people to feel more comfortable sharing their personal pronouns within the webinar. Also, it's a great idea to limit your background noise. As we continue on in this digital age, grace is growing thinner and thinner, and so we want to make sure that we are evolving with the times and doing our best to be respectful of those background noises and anything happening around us. Also, attention to the speaker is extremely important, and I know that it's very easy to go off and multitask, checking your email, watching a video, scrolling through social media. Those things are very easy to do, but can easily be identified and can also be considered rude, just as if you were in a meeting and texting or doing whatever on your phone. That norm carries over to Zoom context as well. It's also important to acknowledge the chat box and be able to respond to individuals as they are contributing. So if in a setting like this, it's great to have a moderator to be able to assist you with that.
Well, just a question, and this is one that I've heard, not because I'm an expert on Zoom. Well, I'll just say sometimes people may not want people to have a glimpse of their homes, or sometimes some people may have a bad hair day, or they're just not feeling it. what's a way to, because I've seen it done and I've seen it not work well, not because I was leading it, but I've heard some people say, turn on your camera. And sometimes that can be a tension between the two. And in this case, the person's, some of the people still didn't turn on their camera. And how do we communicate if that's an expectation? And again, it's a function, and you highlighting things that is around etiquette, but Zoom is, even though it's been around, but it's kind of new. And you know, heck, I go to the vice provost, president, dean's meetings, and half of them don't have their camera on either. So I mean, I'm just curious to see what are some, I guess, some tact ways of setting that expectation before a person comes, so you won't have to say, turn on your camera. And you know, then what happens, what I've learned, that people in the audience, and you know, we all come, you know, you covering a whole range of generations of what we deem as respectful and what is not respectful, you know. And so I would love to hear some of your ideas about that.
I think that it's always a great idea to set expectations from the beginning. And so if you expect for a specific meeting or a specific webinar that all participants have their video on, letting them know prior to is always important, because maybe then they can step outside or go to a coffee shop or something like that. Also, we are going to talk a little bit about the use of Zoom backgrounds if people are not necessarily comfortable with what's surrounding them. And also, Zoom participants have the option of setting a picture for their, when they turn their camera off. And that is a good way in order to give the speaker a visualization of who they're talking to while not necessarily seeing them in that exact moment. And so I think that just having the communication in order to have our expectations be clear, but then also being respectful as to not knowing everyone's situation, and not being demanding when we don't set expectations prior to. I think that that's important.
And some people don't like to have their camera on because they're very self-conscious. And I don't like looking at myself. So if you go to your picture and the ellipses, and if you click on that, it says hide self-camera view, and you can click that on, and then you don't have to look at yourself. And that helps quite a bit. We've got a lot of comments. A lot of people are talking about using Zoom backgrounds. I think that helps, but we have to also be aware that some of us don't have appropriate bandwidth. Yes. And having a camera on will cause connectivity issues. I occasionally have that. I had to up my bandwidth, which that means it comes out of our personal pockets to pay for, you know, for work. So what I have done is, if I'm having connectivity issues, if occasionally it will come up and I'll say my internet is unstable, I just send a message to the facilitator of the meeting and say, I'm really sorry, I need to keep my camera off, I'm having connectivity issues. That way everybody's on the same page. But I also, Dr. Moore, I also think we need to acknowledge that, yes, mental health wise, there are days where it's just living through this pandemic and everything else that's going on. It's just too much. And maybe just the fact that we're logging into a meeting. And so I would just say send a private message to the facilitator and just say, you know, I just need to keep my camera off today. And you know, I don't think we have to go into a lot of details, but I just think if we just let them know that, yes, I'm aware I probably should have my camera on, and then I also notice that if I turn my camera off, I do other things. And so for my accountability to myself, I need to keep the camera on. But I'm sorry, somebody else asked about the lighting. And that circle lighting, and somebody answered back that some people have used it and some haven't. I don't have one. I have some colleagues that have it. Oh, that they, Kira, and I apologize if I said your name wrong. She bought one and didn't see much of a difference. And you can also set in the Zoom settings, this is from the chat box, you can set it that people will have to have their camera on when so you can do that as when you set up your meeting. But I think I agree with Emma that I would let people know that your camera is expected to be on. And then that way, if you don't want your camera on, I would just send that personal message. Sometimes my photo shows up in Zoom and other times it doesn't. And I have that same situation, Kim. And Kim's asking, is there something I can do? Does anybody know why that does or does not happen? Emma, do you?
Yeah, it happens when you're not currently logged into your Carmen Zoom account. And so if you are, you can log on to a Zoom meeting without having a Zoom account necessarily. And that, or I have several Zoom accounts. And so for different work and personal life. And so making sure that you're on the correct Zoom account and logged in is often the key to having the corresponding picture show up.
So, sorry, this is Kim Kovarik. So what I typically do is whatever link is sent to me in my OSU email account from the meeting organizer, I just click on that link and then follow whatever it says. And sometimes when I do that, I will have my picture with my cat Maeve, and other times it looks like now, which is just my name. So that I don't know what I'm doing incorrectly, if anything.
Yeah, so if you log into your Carmen Zoom account and then click on the corresponding link from the sender of the Zoom link, then it should work if you're logged in prior to clicking on that link.
And then Andrea said that the host setting is what might make the difference. Some hosts have their settings to deny attendees to use or change the profile picture. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Thank you. A couple other things that have come up is understanding the host role in Zoom is critical.
Absolutely. As the host role, you have the ability to mute people, unmute people, request that their video be on. You have a ton of other features as the host, and so making sure that the appropriate person has that is important. Anything else?
Yes, I need to keep going. I'm sorry.
Okay.
There's a lot of comments about acknowledging the mental health. You can also set the host settings that attendees are muted when they enter. And I think something else, and this is probably because this happened to me yesterday. I think we just need to offer a lot of people grace right now. I mean, it's overwhelming. And with your work of diversity and inclusion, it's doubly overwhelming right now. And so we had a panel presentation that Yolanda so graciously shared her expertise on yesterday. I had never used a waiting room. I should have used a waiting room. It's a lesson learned. And so if you're hosting and you screw up, you just admit to it. And people understand. I mean, yes, we're stressed. And so some people may go off, but it's nothing personal. We'll be talking about customer service the next time we're all together, and it's nothing against you. It's just you're just the person that they chose to go off on. They're probably upset about something else, but that's just so important right now. And we'll be talking more about that the next time, but that's everything in the questions, Emma.
Okay, great. I just have like a couple more slides if we're okay with time. Okay, perfect. So just making sure that we have Zoom software downloaded to our devices. There's also a Zoom app. So if you're on the go and you have data, you are able to utilize that Zoom app and still participate within the chat and edit your name and do all of the typical features of normal Zoom on your cell phone as well. Also, you want to make sure that those software and applications are up to date regularly, because sometimes you can log in and it will require an update before you're able to proceed. And so making sure that we have those updates ahead of time guarantees that we'll be able to show up on time. Also, make sure that you leave the meeting or webinar before carrying on. We've all seen those mistakes and bloops on Facebook of the embarrassing moment of someone standing up and wearing their boxers, for example. And so making sure that everything is turned off prior to leaving is great. I also have a Post-it note that I put on my camera, so I can put my Post-it note back on the camera just to make sure as well that that no one is able to see me and continuing with my life. Those background wallpapers that we were talking about, I just wanted to shout out that Ohio State has provided several free backgrounds to promote your Buckeye culture, and you can go ahead and download those on the link that is provided right there. And again, having that professional headshot is something that you can utilize when your video is not on, as we talked about before. And are there any other added questions to the Zoom portion? We will have a space for general questions in just a second, but I just wanted to make sure that Zoom questions, comments, and concerns were addressed.
There's nothing new in the chat. Oh, can you share the link for the backgrounds on chat? Yes, we're going to provide this PowerPoint presentation to you. I'll send it to Grace. We'll send it to Grace afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And you can easily have access to that. I don't know if I can copy it right now. I can't copy it, sorry. I thought I could copy it.
Yeah, something else that I like to do, just a side note, when I have a link that I want to go to or a suggestion that I want to remember, I like to take a screenshot of the Zoom application, and then I'm able to go back and look at the picture in order to copy it. But these slides will be provided to you, and so you'll be able to directly click on that link as well.
So I'm assuming we can create a background that is more catered to ODI.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, we may want to do, we're doing some decorative things. I think Kim indicated it'll take place on the second floor, where we'll be featuring students, faculty, staff, a range of different photos. Perhaps we can get our photographer to do a picture of some things in our building, and as well as ODI oriented, that people can download if they see fit to have more of an ODI brand.
That's a great point.
That's a wonderful way of advertising and further branding. So that's wonderful. And Andrea did share the link in the chat box to the backgrounds that you had on here. So thank you. And Colby says that Zoom also provides a library of backgrounds, and he put in a link to that, so everybody can have access to that also. Thank you, Colby and Andrea, for doing that.
Perfect. Just a couple of takeaway thoughts that you can ask yourself as you're pursuing this form of professional communication and continuation of those discussions. So you can always ask yourself, is this the best form of communication to reach this person individually? Keeping in mind that we're not always aware of what's going on in people's personal lives. And so is it more appropriate for me to pick up the phone for this call, or to send an email, or do I need to host a Zoom meeting with them? And so thinking about those different platforms that we can utilize in this age in order to best deliver our message with that. And so that goes into the next question of what is the best delivery method for me to share this message? Am I being clear, concise, consistent, considerate, and relevant? And am I working in a professional manner? Are just a couple of quick questions you can ask yourself before hitting send in order to increase that professionalism just a little bit. So if there are questions, comments, or concerns over any topics or anything else that you would like to discuss within Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Office, I welcome you to put those in the group chat now. And I wanted to thank you all so much for having the Ohio State Leadership Center involved in your office, and really looking forward to continuing this connection with you guys. Please feel free to check us out on our website and follow us on social media for more information on upcoming webinars and inspiring messages. So feel free to put in your questions, comments, concerns, and other topic ideas that maybe you would like to see discussed in the future within the chat box. And with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Moore.
Well, first of all, I just want, on behalf of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, I just want to thank you for taking time to work with the staff and stimulating conversations about this work. And increasingly, we're becoming more and more digital. And to be quite frank with you, some of the things you discuss, in my mind, I might say, well, it's pretty simple. Everybody knows that answer. But I never had a short course on some of these things. I just kind of process elimination. You do it. And I recognize things with the listserv many years ago but with technology, things are sometimes created for one thing, and because of human beings' ability to create, we take the technology in places not necessarily what it was intended to do. I think it's these simplistic things. Some, it was probably, a repeat, they knew it, and there were probably some nuggets. But what I want to say to ODI is that we're good because we pay attention to detail. And when you're in diversity inclusion, you got to pay attention to detail, because some people, they'll hold a soul, they'll take it personal when we don't pay attention to those little nuances. And I think that's really what makes us, separates us in different ways than other units around campus, is that we're constantly trying to be in a process of continuous improvement. And sometimes we know things, but we're trying to become more efficient and most effective. And I'm going to try to do better with email. I get about 150 a day. And when I get 5 pages of email text, it just overwhelms me because, I just can't read through it, and because I'm trying to get through the other emails. And I was taking copious notes on how I can be a better manager of email, because I refuse to just give up my emails. I know some leaders do that, but I do think people feel comfortable knowing if they can send a sensitive email, like I got one this morning, that I'm the only one going to be looking at that email. And so it's a double-edged sword, and we just got to really kind of think through this. But what I think is something would be beneficial, because I feel like I'm not in the know, and some of this stuff is about James, because I can be able to sharpen my saw in these moments, and hopefully you feel the same way. I would like for all of us to get more proficient with Zoom, because I don't see that tool going anywhere. Even when we go back to whatever the new normal is, I just think having this technological social etiquette skills is going to help us in many ways. For example, you think about our president and provost diversity lecture and culture arts series. We were able to reach people unlike any other time in the history. We had literally had people who Zoomed in from all around the country because we had a digital format. Now, some might say, well, I wish I could have been here, but if you weren't here, you were able to still benefit from it. And quite frankly, I have to give that group kudos, as well as Dan and others too. Dan did it yesterday it was just smooth. It was like we were watching TV. It was like a production. And for those of you who don't do it, I don't, because I'm pretty clueless, and I'm just thinking you all just make this stuff happen. But it's, you know, it's easy for those who know how to do it, but if you don't know how to do it, it can be quite frightening. And so we're gonna do more of these. Hey, sweetie, we're gonna do more of these, and see, we're gonna do more of these kinds of things, so we can just refine our toolkit. Because if I told you go take Buckeye Learn, sometimes that's a chore. Because even my own self, you know, I was like, I got to do that training. I got to do the IRB training this weekend, or they're gonna take my name off of my projects. But it's a different when you can use the context of a group and see all those questions and the things. I can't think of who said it. You know, when I'm thinking about pronouns, I never thought about using MX. I just ain't never thought about that. I just, you know, I just, you know, I understand it, but that's not something that I was wired to think about. And I appreciate that. So it's a lot of genius in ODI, and I appreciate everyone. And I thank you all for helping us to stimulate this conversation. And I certainly on a personal level, I felt like my knowledge increased. And not only that, even if people say, well, I know this, they got to hear what other people may not know. And they got to do a cognitive reframe to think about some things. So hopefully you'll come back and bring new tools and different things that we can learn, because I know ODI, many of our staff, they faithfully get the emails around leadership and the quotes. And I have a colleague, she sends it to me every time it come out. And I actually read it because I think it's quite illuminating. And you all do some outstanding work. And I think some of our staff will be sending our staff to some of the personal training, because our strategic roadmap highlights about, leadership development, staff development, all those kinds of things about, we believe that the university can get better if we are better. If we're not better, we don't think the university can get better. I know that's a bold statement, but I have a lot of trust in the people that's on the Zoom and those who are not able to be in the Zoom. So I just we're going to give you a hearty, virtual reaction of saying thank you. And I'm going to yield the balance of no balance of the time, but I'm going to tell everybody, have a wonderful weekend. And remember, over the weekend, we don't check email unless it's an emergency. So you need to unplug and enjoy your families. And we'll see you on Monday, full speed. And thank you everyone for everything they do at the university to make the university better.